Welcome back to more North American SPL action. I'm Anatoly, joined on the desk with Taco. We got some insane North America games today. We got some more games to talk about. How are those last two sets for you specifically?
Starting off the day with the Space Station and Gatekeepers, I thought that was a very clean set by Space Station, seeming to come a little bit more into their form. And then that last set, I mean, that was just absolutely phenomenal gameplay by Luminosity.
A lot has changed between weeks 1 and weeks 2. Let's take a look at the standings here. We saw two 2-0 victories here. Really well done so far. Space Station beating out SPL Gatekeepers, Luminosity finding 3 additional points against ALG, sitting pretty at that #1 standing.
And of course, all of these teams are really looking forward, moving on. And I mean, everybody's just trying to progress their points even further up in the standings. The closer you get now, the better off you'll be in the future.
It's all about advancing throughout the fall split and all about advancing throughout the day. Let's take a look at the rest of today's games out of North America. Up next, we're going to have Noble against a Mighty Storm. And then to wrap things up, E-United against Trifecta. But before we get to those two matches, let's recap here that last set, ALG against LG. Because I'm looking at that last game, and I'm going to look at ALG giving Baskin the Morgan.
And the thing about it, too, for me, personally, I really do feel as though ALG's draft was completely insane. Like, most people will overlook the Kumbhakarna combined with the Nemesis and the Camazotz, but the burst potential that ALG actually had in their own draft was really, really something to keep in mind. It was just so unfortunate when Luminosity got that Morgan selection, it just completely shut down and negated everything they wanted to do with that comp.
So where do you think it went really wrong for ALG? Do you think it was more Luminosity just kind of dominating with this Morgan pick for Baskin in at least game #2, or do you think that they just kind of faltered too early?
Baskin definitely had a start that you never really want to give to the Morgan so early on, but at the same time, it just seemed a little bit finicky for ALG to start off Neilmaw with the Kumba in the mid lane, because Origen doesn't need that kind of help when it comes to clearing. They probably should have given a little bit more assistance to Met Yankee in that duo lane. Even though Met was pressured out early on, he still did a great job coming back into the lane and was actually pressuring out Barracuda more often than not.
Well, coming back into game #2 was Aquarius with that absolutely phenomenal Chalk performance. It's not every day that we see Chalk in the SPL. It's more one of these casual gods, but after getting soloed in game #1 to Cyclospin, he definitely, you know, pumped it up a little bit.
I think that was kind of the mindset behind this selection as well, is Chalky wants somebody who's not going to really go down in the laning phase. He has great clear potential for himself, which really prevented Weekend and Cyclone from getting ahead. They were looking for the snowball off of that Nemesis Camazotz combination, but you can't really make that happen when you've just got a Chalk there chilling, clearing out the lane, no problem.
Aquarius did a lot of work there as Mask was able to, you know, help set him up a little bit in that solo lane. He showed his presence there, assisting, making sure Chalk wouldn't fall too far behind. And no, it's not every day we also see this Nemesis solo out of Cyclone Spin. What was the reasoning behind this, you think?
The Nemesis solo was, again, just to try and further aid ALG's composition. When you've got a Kumbhakarna tossing somebody up into the air, landing back down into the Raijin, you've got the Taiko drums pounding away at them, you've got Nemesis protections getting absolutely shredded on anybody that he chooses to ult. So all around, it could have worked out great. It's just, again, Baskin getting the Morrigan just did the exact same thing against ALG.
Well, unfortunate for ALG, falling to LG, though, as they're going to climb to that #1 spot. But let's talk about set #1 of today. Space Station Gaming against SPL Gatekeepers. Definitely doing a 180 compared to last week.
I would have to agree with that, and a large portion of that can be attributed to Zapman finally doing Zapman things. He really popped off in game #2. Game #1, a little bit more iffy for Space Station. A lot of people seem to feel as though that was actually headed in Gatekeepers' favor, but then they managed to turn it around for Space Station due to some really cohesive team synergy.
It was a lot of synergy as well, not just Zapman playing Jingwei in game #1, Huyi in game #2, but I'm looking also at Annenster here in game #2 playing the Scylla. He was just an absolute monster.
And that's kind of just what you expect from somebody who's known to have as much mechanical prowess as Annenster. He was just non-stop on point with every single one of his abilities. Nothing really ever seemed to be off the mark, and when you're playing these guys that are so dependent upon their skill shots, you need somebody like Andy behind them.
SPL Gatekeepers, you know, unfortunately couldn't find the victory here, but how would you rate their performance playing such a strong team as Space Station?
I do feel as though Gatekeepers still have a lot of potential behind them that they are waiting to unlock, but it's going to take a little bit more time to develop. And granted, that's just what you expect. They're a challenger team. They came up through relegations, and they've got a lot of really strong members by their side. And with Pain de Villon leading the charge, I'm sure they'll be just fine.
Well, a couple more weeks to go here to see how SPL Gatekeepers can bounce back here. But let's head further on in the day. Let's talk about the last set of the day. It's going to be Trifecta against E-United.
And E-United versus Trifecta, these are probably two of the bigger name teams as far as North America is concerned right now. These two teams alone have a lot of power behind them. E-United recently coming up into a little bit more of that standout prowess, and it's just really insane when you think about it because Trifecta has a lot on the line here. They recently swapped around their roster a little bit now that they have Aurora in that support role, and then you've got Kiki still representing the solo lane. Those two players alone have been such a great addition to the team.
They've been playing together for so long before they were even technically SPL players. They've made a name for themselves playing with Fat Chunks Assemble way back in the day before Kiki kind of got separated from Aurora back then. And these players are just so comfortable, it seems, every time they play.
And that's one thing that could definitely be added on to Trifecta. That's what they always seem to be missing a little bit of, was just that one last cycle of fluidity. And now that they've managed to find it, it's just been working out so well for them. And that's why I'm really looking forward to this matchup, because E-United is one of those teams. They're never satisfied unless they are considered themselves to be performing at their best potential.
So how do you think that set is going to go, E-United against Trifecta? How are you going to predict that one?
If anything, I would probably have to lay it up to a split.
A split. Well, that's a safe call for an analyst there to make. But the next set of today, Noble against a Mighty Storm. A little bit of two struggling tales, both starting the first week with the 0-2.
Both started in the first week with the 0-2, but Noble also wasn't playing with their full roster at the time. Now that they will have moswal joining them in the mid lane, this could potentially add on to the team in the way that they were sort of looking for and hoping for. And Noble's always been right on the cusp of being able to break away. It kind of reminds me of the Elevate of NA, is what they remind me of. And that's particularly because they have the possibility to take those wins off of the big boy teams. It's just that they've never necessarily managed to cleanly walk away with a set.
Well, outside of moswal for Noble in the mid lane, I'm also looking at the two soul laners out of both of these teams. You got your Whalrus on the Noble side, Mr. Mark Maloney, and then you also got your Uzzy, who's been making a statement here in the SPL.
Uzzy is one of those players where I am almost certain that we're going to be seeing a lot of him in the future. And I say that with confidence because this guy, I mean, he first made his name on the console side, but he has just been so adept transitioning back over to PC.
Whatever he's done to make that transition has been working out very well for him and his team, as he's going to be taking on Noble here. They lost against Trifecta in week number 1. Not an easy team to take on, especially to start things off in the SPL, considering Trifecta is a team that's been known to kind of not necessarily create the meta, but dictate it to a certain extent.
And Trifecta certainly loves controlling the pacing of a game, but I think that could also have been a huge beneficial factor for Noble, because when you're facing, it's like a David and Goliath story to a certain extent. I mean, sure, they weren't able to find a victory there, but it's still enough. Even through losses, you can find progression, and that's because it's all a learning game when you're first starting off, and that's kind of the same story here for Noble.
So you gave it a split in the last set, or like the next set that's coming up here. How are you going to predict this set?
I would have to favor Noble in this set, because I think that these team members have all played together in the past. Well, moswal was formerly with Noble before. He just took a little bit of a sideshow for a while, but now that he's back in action, I think they're ready to go.
Well, let's see if the SPL team can take on the former Challenger Cup team here, as we're going to head into picks and bans. Mighty Storm with the first pick, first ban, Noble. How do you think they're going to react here in terms, do they have an identity? Because Noble before, back in the day, would always first pick around Wubbn.
I think that this is where they start to establish their identity and break away a little bit more from prioritizing that support role pick. You know that Wubbn is probably going to lean more towards those utility supports such as the Ganesha, the Terras, maybe even a Geb. So with that in mind, and he's able to play so defensively, I would prefer to see Noble try and draft a little bit more around their mid jungle, especially since they're trying to bring in a new mid laner.
So far, we're seeing a lot of warrior bands out of Mighty Storm. Robin Kakulin off the table, first picking that Camazotz. A pretty aggressive option. Don't really know if that's going to go in the hands of Uzzy. Maybe Plazma's going to run in the jungle, whereas Hunbat's audio banned from Noble. First picking that Terra yet again. That seems to be the reoccurring theme for Noble. Just draft an early god for Wobbn.
I can't blame them in this sense, though. Terra is such a prominent pick right now in North America and just in the SPL in general. She provides so much and can bring so much to the table that there's no reason not to just lock that one away confidently. I'm also really liking the Odin edition, but excellent response by a Mighty Storm selecting that Ganesh can run right through those rings.
It's a very aggressive dual lane already out of Mighty Storm. We saw what Space Station Gaming was able to do between this Hu-Yi for Zap and then Ganesh for Jigs. Mighty Storm is going to be able to try to replicate that, but they're going to be up against a Skadi. Is this the first time we're going to see Skadi today?
I was waiting for the Skadi pick to come through. I thought there was no way in hell that Wowy, if anything, doesn't select it in this first three. But I think that was the mentality behind a Mighty Storm, although people might be wondering why they would opt for the Hu-Yi over the Skadi. Ganesh and Hu-Yi has great lane clear. That is just such a strong combination, and it can fare pretty well against the Terra and Skadi.
Not to mention great buff clear on top of that. Whether or not you go Bombas Mask, we're going to see a lot of ricochets very often out of Mighty Storm and a lot of aggression. It's going to be very important, I feel, for Noble to try to play a little bit more reactionary than trying to be the first ones to engage.
A counter-engage seems to be their mentality, and when you have an Odin by your side, you're able to accomplish that fairly well, and they're also drafting incredibly tanky, and without Nemesis being an option, this is just opening up those avenues for Noble to look for this frontline heavy composition.
Nike is going to be a selection here for Mighty Storm. We saw what Uzzy was able to do with it in many SPL games on top of Challenger games. Interesting to see Nike favored for only Mighty Storm and not for other teams.
I think that Nike's been one of those sleeper picks for a while now. She hasn't really been favored by a lot of solo laners, and most will probably just blow her off in comparison to your Erlang Shens, your Sun Wukongs, but all around, Nike actually has great team fighting capabilities.
Especially if you can get to the late game, you get all your passive stacks. That late game fighting potential out of Mighty Storm is going to be so detrimental to how they control these objectives. But to wrap things up for Noble, they're going to last pick that Thoth.
And with Thoth being the selection for moswal, just really excited to finally watch how this new team just comes to light.
Skeeledon, we haven't really talked about him too much in the pre-show, but he's going to be running that Odin jungle, very early blink, trying to cage a multiple members here. Now, Soul can get out of that as long as she's in the disapparate form. Camazotz is going to have to use his ulti to try to get out of that. Nike can jump over, so who is he focusing? Is he waiting for the re-engage?
Technically, every single member on a Mighty Storm can escape from the Odin cage, but the mentality behind the Odin is more so to help out moswal with that early game. Thoth doesn't necessarily have the greatest clearing potential for the laning phase, so if you have an Odin to assist you, you can at least ensure that you're picking up your buffs on the proper timers, not really getting invaded. And for the Odin, that's mostly about forcing escapes. That way the rest of the team can look to collapse.
Not too worried as a Mighty Storm, not even opting for a Fancet because of all the escapes that they just naturally have inside their kit. Still more hogs in the solo lane. Seems to have developed a new meta, quote unquote, in the SPL fall split at least.
At least picking up the hog, it provides the solo laner with the option, if they want to clear out their own buffs. For a Mighty Storm, they'd rather just start on their speed. Plazma and Uzzy looking to secure that one, and they'll be able to have fast enough lane clear to where they're not going to really miss anything out of the lane.
moswal seems to have gotten the little speed minions, expecting that to have gotten either invaded or whatnot. As he now rotates back to the wave in middle, he's going to lose a lot of gold, but he's not going to miss out on any experience. That should give him level 2 once he's done clearing that wave, giving him a nice addition to the second wave.
And that's the key factor factor here for moswal. He only grabbed those minis, not really too concerned about the invade, since both teams are probably aware that the other is running that hog. As much as it is moswal wanting to hit level 2, sure, you sacrificed a little bit of gold early on, but considering that he opted for the Boomba Soulstone, he's not looking to rush that Book of Thoth right away, so he'll be fine.
Noble starting up those oracles on the left-hand side, just spotting around the corners of Wubbn to see how aggressive Mighty Storm was really feeling, but the blink from Skeeledon jumping over the wall, a lot of damage being dealt onto Wolp, and that should be the first blood credited for moswal.
And moswal more than happy to secure that bounty, and onto Wolp of all people, forced out of the Aegis, and that is the beauty of having that Terra CC.
Not having purification beads is not a bad idea sometimes, but if you're gonna get stunned, there's gonna be a lot of follow-up damage, and that's the perfect example. Despite the nerves being dealt onto Odin, Skeeledon and his team trust that this is still a viable pick under these given circumstances.
And a lot of that call-out was probably just from Wubbn alone. I don't really feel as though Mighty Storm thought that they were threatened. However, the case might not be the same way. In the solo lane side, Wubbn just looking to put a little bit of pressure, and he's putting a lot of poke down.
It's not very common that we'll see a support make this 2-minute rotation on the solo lane, unless your name is Aurora. But that rotation from Wubbn doing work already, alleviating a little bit of pressure here for Whalrus, just a freely farm here, and this is not a bad idea, trying to shut down Uzzy playing this Nike, not allowing him to get to the mid to late game comfortably.
The longer you can delay a Nike's passive from stacking, and a Nike in general from continuing to max out that ultimate shield, this is really the most punishable time period for Uzzy. Otherwise, he's just going to be super tanky and somebody that you look to ignore as opposed to try and engage upon.
Now, it's already a difficult matchup for Uzzy playing this Nike against Whalrus, simply because every single time that Ren comes out, here comes a turtle knockup to interrupt shots 2 and 3 potentially, but that could be also a counter rotation possibility for Plazma. As long as Whalrus continuously uses his escape to disrupt that flow, he could be the target for a gank.
Well, Plazma is just trying to contest the fire elementals. However, those are fully in control for Noble. More than happy to keep securing that global farm for themselves.
Already a little bit of a comfortable 600 gold lead for Noble as they got that first blood. Getting most of these neutral camps as well. These oracles was done by them earlier on. They're able to really just out-rotate Mighty Storm, at least for the time being. It's still very early on to the game. Mobility, though, despite it going for Noble in the early game, I still got to give it to them in the late game simply because of that Terra's Blessing.
The Terra's Blessing, and on top of that, Wubbn grabbed a sprint just in case he didn't feel as though they were fast enough already.
The blinks are available for both of these junglers if they're looking for those highlight plays, but how do you rate blink against both of these gods versus going for a more defensive option?
Well, blink works out great for Odin, but I'm paying more attention to Noble just securing the buffs from a Mighty Storm. Nobody there to try and help out Akillathehun, clearing out his own jungle camps.
Oh, a lot of trouble here. Akillathehun forced to use the purification beats, but a nice little stun onto Wowy, not able to really get off his own ultimate. Skadi, it's very easy for you to get your ultimate as long as you have the dash on Caldir. It's basically almost guaranteed, but that dive bomb can be that difference in terms of death or survival.
I'm a little bit surprised that Wowy actually chose to not continue aggressing there, considering that he did have his ultimate available, but they were able to force out the Huyi's beats, and so without those being up and running, I'm certain that Wowy's just going to keep putting the pressure on in his duo
I think
lane.
they also saved that because they got the red buff, I believe, stripped away. Oracles now being done. Wubbn was thinking about staying on that Gold Fury. They have the vision of the mid wave, but no one really was spotted because those back left Harpies were being started. But despite not finding the kill on Akilla, they stripped away his red buff. Slow and steady, increasing more of a separation gap in golden experience between Wowy and Akilla.
If there's one guy I don't want to see acquiring a ton of farm for free, it's definitely a Skadi. That Calder is just going to put the hurting onto Huyi. Huyi can fare pretty well against her, considering this right here. He's got the stun, he's got the slow, forcing out the purification beads from Wowy. However, with his jump being down, Calder is there to take up all the other damage, but Plazma found Wowy on the backside.
Plazma making the rotation happen, using that blink to great success. Mighty Storm are on the board, and more importantly, this is the start that they need to try to build up on Nike's passive. And this is a nice opportunity here that Akilla really exploited, because Wowy, when he first backed, he only had boots 2, whereas Akilla, after being backed off of that aggression, he finished off his Ninja Tabby, starting his Devil Gloves here, so using that extra mobility, power, and attack speed to his advantage.
And now he's got a 2-level lead over Wowy, which kind of just negates Wowy having secured the jungle buff farm from his side.
6 minutes into the game, Noble and Mighty Storm still with just 1 kill apiece. And most of these teams in the SPL, whether you look at North America or Europe, they don't really necessarily always try to play super hyper aggressive, although that last Luminosity ALG game had quite a bit of kills on the board. But what seems to be the reasoning here between these teams slowing the pace?
They kind of need to slow the pace down as far as Noble is concerned. Sure, you've got the Odin who can help out with the early game factor alongside of the Erlang Shen, but everybody else is kind of just trying to build up as much farm as possible. The sooner that they hit those levels and start reaching those item power spikes, the better off they'll be.
A little bit of aggression from Skeeledon off the mark, however, with that bird bomb jump combination. Uzzy making a little loop-de-loop, trying to see if he can steal away this blue ball. However, Whalrus will pick it up. Uzzy could be in a little bit of trouble. If he uses that jump, Skeeledon will follow suit and use that ultimate.
Which is exactly why he's trying to hold it for as long as possible. He's not trying to get caged inside of the ring, but Whalrus might not give him an option, and sure enough, there he goes. But the taunt, it's not enough. Uzzy already made it underneath his own tower line. They don't feel comfortable to dive this.
A little bit of trouble as Wolp as he uses that supernova, trying to kite around. Aegis being used to separate, buying him a little bit of time, but it doesn't matter. moswal with the 2nd kill of the game.
And moswal and Wubbn, 2 sides of the map being aggressed at once. That was a great move for Noble, spreading out a Mighty Storm just to make sure that neither side really was sure which way they wanted to gank.
I'm looking at the right side gank potential there onto Uzzy, and I think there was a huge disconnect between Skeeledon and Whalrus. Skeeledon pulled the trigger a little bit too early, I would say, not really waiting for Whalrus to use that ultimate to guarantee the bird bomb jump.
Unfortunately for Skeeledon, the mentality there is most solo laners will look to just head straight back to that tower line, which is why we saw him bird bomb into the tower. Unfortunately, it was just counteracted because Uzzy, being Uzzy, just knew better, pushed further in, and that was when the taunt came out from Whalrus, and it just wasn't enough to keep him locked down, considering how much health, or how much of a health shield he was able to attain from his ultimate.
What was going on with the rest of Mighty Storm? Because there was a 2-on-1 on right, Wolp was in a 2-on-1 of his own. There was 3 members unanswered for. Mighty Storm just not helping out the rest of their teammates.
Well, the Huyi is always going to be locked down to the dual lane pretty much for these early laning phase portions, but for the Ganesh, it seemed as though he might have been back to base during that brief time period, which is why the aggression was called out for by Noble.
Very calculated as Noble, trying to look for any picks that they can. Plazma playing a little bit aggressive, going to get stunned out for his trouble, but Camazotz does what a Camazotz does best, and that's sustain after dealing out the poke.
Speaking of sustain, though, Killer wishes he had a little bit more of it right now as he's getting aggressed on fully by Skeeledon inside of that ring. Nowhere left to go. Purification beads already forced out. Vivian just trying to save his own life, however, already getting rooted out. The Dharmic Pillars have come through, but Final Judgment will take his life away.
moswal with his 3rd kill of the game. What a performance here. It seems to me that Noble are in a good spot here with moswal coming back to that mid lane, and I think a little bit too much aggression from Akillathehun on the left side. We saw what he was able to do by bullying out Wowy with Plazma to clean up earlier on, but this time without his dive bomb, that was an easy counter rotation from Skeeledon to cage him in.
Well, if you take a look at the map, actually hold that thought. Plazma going a little bit too deep, forced up into his bat out of hell, trying to get away. Same thing for Uzzy, just looking to get out, but excellent rotation by Wubbn, just really aiding Whalrus there during that tower dive.
Trying to alleviate a little bit of pressure here as Uzzy safe under his own wave now as buffs have respawned. Plazma with his own speed buff there. He hasn't really made too much of an impact this game with the exception of that 1 cleanup kill after the aggression from Akilla, but he wasn't there that 2nd time after that 1v1 boxing fight.
And going back to what I was saying, though, and this is just classic solo laner action, man. They're just both of them trying to slap each other with as much damage as possible.
If you got the abilities, why not throw them out? You have an exorbitant amount of mana to be used anyway. You just have a finite amount of health to play with until you have to respawn. And if you have the health chalice, you might as well be looking for these bully opportunities.
And I would have to agree with that. But going back to what we were initially trying to talk about as Vivian tries to steal away those left mid harpies, the thing about Akilla playing that aggressively in the dual lane is this is the best time period for a Hui to try and bully out a Skadi. Having his ultimate and his ricochet, it's actually really great at catching a Skadi off guard and lowering her health. Now, Skilla actually wants to be the one.
Skeeledon blinking in, Terra's Blessing being used, trying to get somebody out of position, but Noble were a little bit wishy-washy. They're not wanting to all commit under the same target, getting the oracles for themselves, but not finding a kill.
It seems as though Wubbn really wanted to aggress. When you pop that Terra's Blessing, that automatically means go for the rest of your team. Skeely trying to follow up with that, but with Huyi having his own ultimate, just massive AoE zoning, preventing Noble from feeling comfortable pursuing that any further.
And another reasoning why I kind of enjoy watching Akilla play aggressive earlier on in this game was the fact of the build choice from Wowy to go for this Transcendence here. He's a bit of a delayed power spike because he still has quite a bit of time until that gets completed. How are you favoring these two different item selections between these hunters?
Well, this is kind of just the itemization that you have to opt for as a hunter role. Speaking of which, Skeely trying to poke out Akilla as much as possible, getting turned on himself a little bit there. But I think Akilla could tell that there was somebody else lurking around the corner, and sure enough, Wubbn's just hiding around side of it.
Look at the vision on the mini-map here. We see the sentry ward right above the purple buff coming for Akilla, so he's definitely spotted out those rotations. But then more importantly, look at the ward here for Noble. We're seeing it underneath so aggressively, so that way this is going to allow Wowy to potentially push on forward and spot any sort of counter gains coming out of Plazma.
Huyi has a sentry ward for himself, but it's placed in a corner that's away from those two regular wards by Noble, and so he's got the vision for the direct line of attack. But should Skeeledon look for a blink on that very underhanded side, he'll definitely be able to find it.
And Skeeledon needs to set up some more places. He traps Vivian under that cage. He doesn't have the dash to get away from it, but trying to find a response kill. Plazma going in the sky, finds a return kill. Jungle for support. So far, so good for Noble. It's a favorable trade for them as they also take out Plazma 2 for 1.
And moswal just building up the bounties from these kills. He's becoming a pretty big issue now. Level 14, 4-0 and 1. Been a part of nearly every single kill.
Akilla having to use the beads after getting stunned by the Terra. Wowy capitalizing on this by using his ability to invade the red buff, doing a lot of damage with that kill there. 3 members stand strong here out of Noble, trying to strip this away. Uzzy has now made the rotation. moswal lingering right behind. Sun's being dropped, trying to confirm the own red buff as Wubbn is forced to taunt. He's taking a lot of damage, pops the shell, trying to run away. He does get the heal, and Uzzy's going in with the ultimate.
But Uzzy might have gone a little bit too deep as the rest of Noble starts turning on him for doing what Whalrus started off. Thankfully for both of these teams, though, all members will be able to get out, but for a Mighty Storm, the real victory, actually for Noble, it looks as though that buff was actually secured by Noble.
It was grayed out. That means Noble, the Chaos side, has stripped that away from Mighty Storm. No red buff for Akillathehun, and as long as Wowy gets this next red buff, we're going to potentially see a 1v1 boxing fight, especially considering Akilla used those beads.
And going back to what you were asking me about with the differentiation or the separation in the build between these two hunters, Transcendence on Skadi is the right way to go typically because it prevents you from running out of mana early on, and on top of that, Kaldor gets such a huge power spike from it, and that's the real beneficial factor that Wowy is looking for. He just wants to put out as much damage as possible. Sure, it takes a little bit longer to come online because you've got to save up that a little bit more gold, but once you have it, it's there. The power spike comes almost right away. The 50 stacks are kind of just additional.
And the lack of attack speed between going for that Transcendence and Warrior Tabby means that Wubbn is trying to complement that by rushing this Shogun's Kusari very early in the build, going for a Hide of Urchin. Normally, out of support, we'll see the Jade Emperor's Crown rather early, trying to limit some of this physical damage, but hold that thought. Golthier being started by Noble, already less than half health. It's only Vivian right there, but it doesn't matter. because Final Judgment secures it.
And it's going to be the rest of a Mighty Storm trying to collapse onto Noble to punish them for getting away with this Gold Fury, but the beautiful Odin cage by Skeeledon will just stop everybody in their tracks.
It doesn't have to be used just offensively. You can use it as an escape mechanism, shown perfectly right there, and especially considering there's no Phantom out of Mighty Storm, there's no way to realistically chase that down. You don't want to necessarily use your escapes to get past that cage unless it's confirmed. Uzzy baiting Noble in a weird situation here as Portal Demon is going to get started out here, sitting at about half health. Skeeledon right underneath. He gets spotted out. Is forced to jump away to the rest of his team.
With Noble knowing that a Mighty Storm are trying to commit to this Portal Demon, everybody wants to try and defend, but unfortunately for a Mighty Storm, they just don't have quite enough damage to secure that one.
I'm really surprised Mighty Storm are not sticking to this objective, considering moswal used that Final Judgment to confirm the Gold Fury. This is a great opportunity to just fight here.
But there's the permafrost from Skadi to consider, and the amount of CC still available for Noble is more than enough to stop a Mighty Storm.
Uzzy going in, finding a couple of knockups. Portal Demon's being juggled away. Skeeledon's forced to retreat, but lands into the damage coming out of Wolp. Mighty Storm confirming the Portal Demon for now, but it's actually Vivian that's stuck between a rock and a hard place as he gets responded to.
And Turtleman just looking for any sort of a ricochet, unable to find anybody, but they at least secured the objective, and that's the important portion.
A little bit of gold. They're able to probably heal up, buy some items, take that portal now just to potentially look for a rotation play. That's exactly what Plazma is thinking about as he makes that rotation on right-hand side. It doesn't seem that he has the timer of the speed or the blue buff. Otherwise, he'd probably be waiting right there, considering Skeeledon's still dead for 3 seconds.
Well, he's still not done just yet, looking to see what he can find in the mid lane, knowing that these right mid Harpies are going to be spawning anyway. He might as well secure those and then poke his head around the rest of Noble's jungle.
Noble with a 2,300 goal lead, 17.5 minutes in here. Is this kind of a lead something to be worried about if you're Mighty Storm?
I don't think that it's super detrimental just yet to a Mighty Storm, but if they're not careful, moswal could really become out of control.
And speaking of being out of control, Wolp's item selection, Shaman's Ring, almost fully stacked here. What an interesting selection. It's not a very popular one since you're not always guaranteed to get that damage at certain aspects of the game, depending on what phase of the game you're trying to get it at. But really wanting to make sure that he's going to maximize his DPS here.
Maximizing DPS, sure, but potentially working against him, considering he could have gone for something a little bit cheaper, such as a Bancrofts, and still acquired a pretty massive power spike as well as lifesteal that would benefit him heavily.
Maybe his mentality here is the fact that he's going to allow Vivian, Plazma, and Uzzy to do their thing, and as long as he's not getting aggressed on, you don't technically get that bonus passive coming out of Bancroft's talent, so why not go for the more guaranteed damage at every single stage with a Shaman's Ring?
Well, speaking of guaranteed damage, moswal's poke out already onto Plazma is just completely shredding these gods without any magical defense.
He was thinking about making that rotation on the top side, but he got spotted out, knock up into a lot of damage coming out of moswal. The chase is on, but Wolp with the stellar burst gonna slow Noble down for the moment. Everyone's just gonna regroup to their lanes. Both hunters just quietly farming away.
That's kind of just what both of these hunters are going to be left to do. Neither side can really get an advantage over the other when there's so many people from both teams in that mid lane, because the counter rotation and the initial rotations would be easy to balance out.
So we're seeing hi-rez out of Wowy.
That's not a surprise to me. Skadi is one of the few gods in the game who can get away with a bruiser-esque build because of the way that her kit works out. Kaldor just provides so much power, and you're looking for Skadi to pick as more of a utility hunter. I mean, she does the damage portion just fine, but the utility out of her permafrost is what's really the big winning factor in team fights.
Does this mean that Mighty Storm needs to focus more on magical defense now, trying to limit moswal, since they don't have to worry about too much physical power or DPS out of Wowy?
I think they still need to worry about both for sure. Even with Hide of the Urchin slowing some of that power spike from Wowy, he's still going to be dealing quite a decent bit of it, and it's certainly nothing to scoff at.
Gold Fury is about to respawn in 15 seconds as we head past the 20-minute mark. Mighty Storm with 3 kills. They still need 7 more to get one of those stacks of the Nike passive, and so far so good out of Noble as they're pretty much winning a lot of these team fights, not building too much of a goal lead here, but if they can confirm this next Gold Fury, that's when things could get a little slippery for Mighty Storm.
Even though the gold lead is only around 2,100, 2,300 gold in Noble's favor, it's the experience that I'm keeping an eye on because that's practically even between these two teams.
It seems that way, at least. We're going to see both of these mid-mages heading to that level 17 marker, getting 4 points in their ulti as Uzzy was trying to escape, but Skeeledon with the speed buff is going to trap him down as the rest of Mighty Storm is starting up the Gold Fury. Seems that they have confirmed it. Plazma will secure that one. 1 for 1 thus far in terms of gold. Uzzy's trying to walk away, but there's nowhere to go. Up in the sky is Plazma trying to find more kills. Can he get it? No, he's just going to walk away as Vivian's going to get taunted into a bad spot, knocked up into the graveyard. 2 for nothing, though, thus far. Noble, they lose the Gold Fury, but they find 2 picks.
But even with only 3 members available for Noble, they were the ones that actually initiated the aggression onto a Mighty Storm. A Mighty Storm probably could have turned that into their favor, but they didn't even feel comfortable trying to fight into Noble, even though Noble had 2 members taking out Uzzy.
Noble just maximizing their 5-on-3 advantage by getting the tier 1 on right, tier 1 mid, trying to go for this tier 2 in the solo lane, but Plazma is trying to thwart this alongside Akillathehun. Gonna be able to hold on to that 1,500 gold for the moment, but that tower took a lot of damage, and the rest of Noble are very content with getting every single objective after losing that Gold Fury, now going for that Portal Demon.
And nobody around a Mighty Storm is trying to defend this objective. Everybody had to back after that aggression from Noble on the Gold Fury, but Noble has Terra sustained in their favor, which is why a Mighty Storm have to be really precise with any teamfight initiation they start off with. If they don't secure a kill from the get-go, that sustain out of Terra is going to eventually add up and put Noble in a more favorable position.
So I asked you earlier on in this game as to why teams have slowed down the pace of a lot of the action in the SPL fall split, and that's a perfect example right there of when you try to go for a risky play such as the Gold Fury in a straight up 5v5 situation of what you can lose after the fact. 2 tier 1 towers, the Portal Demon, your own speed, and half of the tier 2.
It's almost as though the Gold Fury was completely obsolete, and it basically was obsolete when you consider it. If anything, Noble came out on top there despite losing that objective, because taking away T1 towers is still taking away a lot of map pressure from a Mighty Storm. Those positions where they would normally be able to default back to in case they find themselves in a tight situation, they can't do that anymore.
No more safe haven or shelters for Mighty Storm under those towers. We're going to see a little bit of aggression on the left-hand side, forcing Vivian and Killa back to their own tier 2 tower. But wow, moswal just deleting Plazma. So many, look at this, 6-0-2 for the Thoth mid.
Plazma even tried to use his beads there, and it still wasn't enough to get away from moswal's damage.
So much damage. Spear of Desolation, fully stacked Book of Thoth, trying to finish off that Gatekeepers, and this is a level 19, very scary Thoth. Top of the player damage thus far, 15,000, more than 5,000 to the next opponent.
And that is just absolutely insane. Anytime a Thoth is able to run rampant, in this case, speaking of which, Skeeledon's trying to run rampant right now into T2 towers. Uzzy's getting aggressed on entirely by Noble, but not enough damage just yet from Noble to want to commit underneath there.
Trying to take advantage of that 5v4 was Noble, but they couldn't secure the tier 2 tower. Got it down to half health, not that bad of a little bit of a play out of Noble. It's all about inches and little feats of positioning battle that you can get. You give away 1 foot, you take 2 in response, and Noble so far have been winning this tug of war.
But with the Camazotz beads being unavailable for at least another minute and a half, Noble have this in mind. They're probably just going to try and immediately shut out Plazma. If he looks to be aggressive with that blink engagement, he'll most likely just be CC'd out, focused, and eliminated.
Or at least forced to use the ulti prematurely, not being able to use it offensively. And Plazma, like we mentioned before, has been relatively quiet after that first kill onto Wowy on the left-hand side. But now that Wowy has that high diversion, it's going to be very difficult to really lock him down. Now having 1 stack, some more penetration with that Titan's Bane, trying to melt some of these objectives.
Now they're trying to melt the speed buff, and Skeeledon, sure enough, will be able to secure that alongside of Wubbn. That's a rough spot for a jungler to be in.
And especially if you have to concede your own blue buff to follow up. Nice root from Wubbn, sets up half of the health out of Plazma. Great range coming out of moswal. Killa not on the mark with his ricochet. The rest of Mighty Storm have to lick their wounds after their jungler sat with half health.
moswal and Wubbn are taking complete advantage of a Mighty Storm with their ranged poke efficiency. moswal is just using his wall at every single opportunity he can find to try and toss out his abilities. It doesn't matter whether he looks for the offensive stun or even just the initial line attack. All of it is just dealing so much damage to a Mighty Storm right now.
It just seems to me that Noble have built a composition around this Thoth. They literally last picked it this game with being second pick, and they have the setup necessary to find some of these long-range abilities. Terra's got that root crush combination. Odin can lock people down. Skadi can make it a nightmare trying to even fight in the jungle. Skeeledon gonna get stunned out, but the shield gonna absorb most of that damage, trying to find the root onto Plazma on the left-hand side. Not on the mark, but both of these junglers are gonna have to probably heal up in the fountains.
Most of Skeeledon's purpose right now on this Odin, knowing that a Mighty Storm has so many escapes on their side, it's just to spam his ring as often as possible, force out any actives, because if he does happen to catch somebody without their escape, then they're practically, they're all but dead.
And it's going to be hard to run away from this Odin. Look at his build here. Winged Blade, Masamune, he even has the Greaves here. It's going to be so difficult to lock him down, not to mention the blink and the sprint. Second Gold Fury attempted by Noble. They found the first one, couldn't get the second one. Third one should go their way with a nice zoning here. The rest of Noble, they're not done yet. They want some kills.
And it's going to be Skeeledon going straight onto Wolp, knowing that Wolp doesn't have that Disapparate available. Plazma forced up into his ultimate defensively, but Uzzy trapped in between all 5 members of Noble, getting rooted out by Wubbn, popping the thorns, and now his ultimate just trying to escape.
Uzzy's kit is completely expended. The rest of Noble are going to disengage after forcing out some of these ultimates and relics, securing their second Gold Fury of the game, building off of a 7,000 gold lead.
And the movement speed from Skeeledon just really came to light right there, chasing down Wolp all the way to his red buff. Meanwhile, the rest of Noble was just collapsing on top of a Mighty Storm, preventing them from trying to aid their mid laner. And sure, Wolp manages to live, doesn't have to expend his actives, but it's just that the zoning capabilities from Skeeledon.
Push a bear against the wall, and Mighty Storm are trying to respond with another objective of their own. Portal Demon being started, sitting very low, will be secured by Mighty Storm. The rest of Noble are around the corner here. Wubbn goes in alongside Skeeledon, blinked away, but Wolp in the Disapparate form. Very low is Vivian, gonna get knocked up into play. Skeeledon jumping onto Killa, forcing him out as well. 5-on-4 for the moment over Noble, but they're not done yet. They're gonna root Uzzy into play. Skeeledon with that sprint doesn't have the cage available, and this tier 2 tower on the right-hand side is looking very tasty for Noble.
Even after securing the Portal Demon, doesn't really seem to make a difference as far as Noble's aggression is concerned. Uzzy again forced into his ultimate, although everybody from Noble is pretty low right now. Just not enough members from a Mighty Storm able to give chase.
I'm really surprised that nobody took the portal, trying to find a flank after how much damage was dealt onto Noble, despite losing Vivian in the process here. Everyone from Noble's forced to disengage. The Fire Giant will not be looked at by Mighty Storm, trying to capitalize off of that rotation. And what is it going to take for Mighty Storm to stop getting pushed against the wall?
They just have to stop getting picked. And it's not even that anybody's been dying a high amount of times or frequently. It's just that when you're poked out to the point where you need to back, you're excluded from the team fight. You're basically dead.
It just seems the damage coming out of moswal is too much for Mighty Storm to handle, sitting at 20,000 player damage almost 30 minutes into the game. This is the kind of MVP performance that Noble need out of one of their players.
The issue is, how do you get to moswal? Camazotz is typically the guy that you're looking for, shutting down these mages such as a Thoth, but he's not able to launch any portion of his kit towards moswal, because the second that somebody even looks at moswal, the rest of Noble is immediately there to back him up.
So much protection appeals for their mid laners. Sprint, Terra's Blessing, the Roots Crushes, Odin Cage, knock up taunt, pin from Erlang Shen. It's almost endless out of Noble. And even if you do catch up to a moswal, now there's no way you're going to be able to help your own backline. So Wolp and Akillathehun is going to have to be very mindful about their own positioning.
I think his actives have been pressured out maybe once this game. On top of that,
being pressured out is Vivian as he takes half of his health. Skeeledon is trying to catch somebody out of position. Uzzy sitting at about half health right now as Vivian dashes away. Oh my god! Final Judgment. Wowy, though, will get credit with that kill on Akillathehun. The rest of Noble here, 5-on-4, gonna try to find Wubbn here in the process. He's very low. It's Uzzy jumping in the back, using that shield, trying to zone Wowy away, but it doesn't matter because his support falls. 5-on-3, Mighty Storm have to disengage.
And it's gonna be Uzzy getting locked down. Wubbn taking the credit for that kill, despite that's the classic last hit scenario of classic kill secure from the support, but excellently played. I mean, when everybody's on top of him doing damage, somebody's gonna get credit for the kill.
With that 5-on-2 now, the rest of Noble get their first Fire Giant of the game. This is when things get really dicey on the receiving end here. You're already down so much gold, 10,000 to be exact, and this is the Fire Giant siege. You only have 2 more tier 2 towers. That 10,000 gold is going to go to 13.
What seemed like a relatively close game has now just spiraled completely out of control for a Mighty Storm. Noble have just taken this one by the reins, and they are just looking to completely dominate.
I mean, who does Mighty Storm go on for Noble, like you were talking about before? You can't get to moswal. Wowy's building tanky because he doesn't have an escape with his Height of Urchin, and now Shifter Shield. He has enough defenses to buy him a lot of time for somebody to help him. And who are you going to go on? A tanky Whalrus, a tanky Wubbn, or Skeeledon, who's just going to cage himself and walk away?
The CC provided by Noble is just been controlling every aspect of these team fights. Wowy and moswal already have great self-peels for themselves. Combining that on top of the rest of their team, it just became too much to handle for a Mighty Storm. And where things really started to collapse for a Mighty Storm was actually after they secured that Gold Fury. It would seem like a play that was going to be in their favor was just completely 180 because of what Noble was able to acquire afterwards.
The risk versus reward was just not in Mighty Storm's favor, as they lost too much after their first Gold Fury of the game. Noble capitalized with so many objectives after the fact, and that's the kind of mindset a team in the SPL needs to deliver, not only on how you can secure objectives without losing too much, but okay, we lost this objective, what can we strip away as a response?
And that just goes to show the progression for Noble. A Mighty Storm has actually been doing quite a lot in this game up until, even despite being at such a golden experience deficiency, they're still doing a pretty excellent job at trying to counteract when they can.
Heading into the 33-minute mark, with Noble already stripped away in that mid-Phoenix, they're playing the cleanup crew. They're getting the Gold Fury along the way, making sure they're not going to give anything back to Mighty Storm, because sitting at 82,000 collective gold as a team, you don't need it in terms of finishing off your build. You're already 6 items deep, upgraded relics there. Sure, you can potentially save up for your 3k potions, but honestly, you're sitting really pretty for Noble. This is the time to clean up these Phoenixes after the fact with Fire Giant still for another minute and a half.
Noble didn't even need that Gold Fury. It's, again, like you said, just something you take because you don't want to let the enemy team have any opportunities to catch back up. And with that in mind, Noble are looking to keep their reign going as they're choosing to aggress onto this left side Phoenix for a Mighty Storm.
I'm looking at moswal here. He's dropping the walls, trying to extend the range. The damage from Wowy also gets augmented with those in-hands as long as he fires through the wall onto the Phoenix. Not really seeing Noble push forward quite yet. They're looking for the poke instead, really abusing the range out of this Thoth. Wow, or Uzzy rather, sitting about 75% health, and that's all Noble need to do. They still have Fire Giant buff for another 45 seconds, and here comes this next wave.
And that's all that they were waiting for. Wave means go, and the Terra's blessing, I'm sure, is about to follow up right after. Ring has already been expended by Skeeledon, trying to just zone out 2 members from a Mighty Storm. Meanwhile, on the backside, moswal charging up that final judgment, release straight onto the Ganesha.
Vivian taking a lot of damage, just forced to retreat, and Uzzy's forced back into the grave. 5-on-4 for Noble, as Whalrus is very low, buying himself a little bit of time as he uses his ultimate to heal up. Skeeledon doing what he can to so, and moswal with his 8th kill of the game, 8-0-5. So many kills, so many assists, just all over the board.
This has been such a strong debut from Noble with their new mid laner. moswal has really come out to play today.
It just seems that way. It's sometimes some players benefit very well off of a break while others need to play constantly, and that's the refreshing thing to see between a lot of these different players. moswal, welcome back to the SPL, brother.
He's more than happy to be here, looking like quite the mechanical genius on this Thoth, and already so much gold for Noble, almost a 20,000 gold lead against the Mighty Storm.
How in the world does the Mighty Storm hold this game? They're gonna have to try to defend these Phoenixes. Mid one has respawned. Fireshine's about to respawn in 25 seconds. Noble with a very commanding lead.
The target focus from Noble has just been a little bit too effective against the Mighty Storm. Skeeledon in that last engagement, for example, didn't even look to try and cage away the gods that could probably get bursted out a little bit quicker. He chose to just zone Akillathehun and Plazma away from the fight. The longer that they were away from the fight just left Uzzy and Vivian all the more open to that damage.
Do you think Mighty Storm kind of overvalued their own escapes by not picking up Phantom in this game?
To a certain extent, yes, but you can't necessarily fault them for that oversight because it's not something that you really pay much mind to, considering that everybody in your team does have an escape. I think more than anything else, it's not so much the draft as much as it is Noble just played theirs better.
At this point in the game, if you're Mighty Storm, you're not even discussing this game any longer. You're already thinking about game number 2, about the picks and bans over there, and what you need to change or what you need to prevent. And if you're trying to make the analysis here, what would you like to see differently from Mighty Storm?
Well, all of these players on a Mighty Storm have been hanging around the cusp of entering the competitive bracket for SPL.
Oh my God!
moswal!
The double shot coming out of moswal from a distance, taking out Plazma, taking out Akillathehun. Noble are here, and they're in charge. Mighty Storm is gonna fall in game number 1, and what a shot from a distance out of moswal. 10-0-6.
Fun with Final Judgment. It was such a lull, and then out of nowhere, moswal just destroys the dreams of a Mighty Storm.
I thought it was going to be a cookie cutter, like, all right, they're going to get the mid Phoenix, they're going to slowly bully Mighty Storm away, but no. Not moswal. Not today, says moswal.
He was ready to end the game right then and there, jump on into the next one. So first game will go the way of Noble after a pretty commanding lead the entire match. Well, I shouldn't say the entire game, but the way that Noble effectively shut down a Mighty Storm, even during the moments where you felt as though a Mighty Storm might come out ahead, that was just excellent gameplay all around.
I just didn't see any sort of playmaking from Mighty Storm at all. Once the first play from Plazma, there was just not much sort of follow-up after that. Once it got to the mid to late game, once Wowy got his defensive items, and once there was a lot of damage for moswal, there was just nothing a Mighty Storm could do. Let's take a look again at that double kill coming out of moswal there. He's just charging it up from a distance, fires it, doing so much damage. I think did he one-shot Plazma? Or?
I'm pretty sure he one-shot both of them with that one. And it's the way his positioning behind the corner of that wall. Everybody is so focused on trying to keep the spacing away from the Odin, away from the Terra roots, that everybody, you just forget that Thoth throws stuff over walls and it hurts.
It's very important to be a little bit misleading at times, you know. Play that sleight of hand a little bit. Play to your strengths, play to your weaknesses, and that's exactly what moswal did. Let's head